Right, hello, welcome to the inside of an AMG GT Black Series, Mercedes-AMG GT Black Series, which I've just got in. I'm at the Lausitzring, which is in eastern Germany, and the Black Series, as you may well know, is the pinnacle of an AMG model range. Chief among the things you would probably want to know is it's got 730 PS, 800 Newton meters, and that is from a flat plane crank bi-turbo V8 rather than the cross plane crank. So the normal V8, as you know, sounds very rumbly. This will not sound very rumbly because flat plane cranks are different. So instead of the woofle, you get more like a Ferrari brop. So you'll probably hear that as we go, and that usually helps engines rev a bit higher. I don't quite understand the physics for that, but I'll get on top of that. And then there's a load of aero. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut away and do a rather informal walk around. I hope you'll forgive the informality of that. But there's loads to talk about in terms of the way the air moves around places. Okay, so forgive the slightly informal nature of this, but the man who designed the aero for this has designed the aero for the GT3 car, so he knows what he's doing. Now, first thing to note is that there is this splitter at the front, and you'll see it's pulled out here. These are you do not have to put in, but they've put in for use on track today. And you can do that. You have to get on the ground and release two levers and pull it out yourself. This here, this metal plate, hang on, there we go. This metal plate here is attached to a strip which actually the air sucks this down as you're on circuit. In a way, you can't pull it with your bare hands. I've tried on a model. I literally tried to pull it down, and you can't do it. It sucks it down, and in braking zones, places like the Nordschleife, it will actually spark, which is cool. So the grille is larger, which lets in more cooling air, lets in more air to the engine as well. This is shaped. This little thing here actually develops a couple of kilos of downforce. Now, I didn't close the bonnet for a very good reason. In that, right, so in here the radiator is angled over. It's upright in an AMG GT-R. It's angled over, which gives it more room to be larger, but as significant is the way that nice thing here creates a seal with that thing there. So when you are stationary, if you've been on track, one of the cooling issues with an engine which makes 730 horsepower is how you get cool air to it all the time. Now, the fan in here rotates. That means the air swirls, and what they initially found is that when they were simulating it, is that one bank of cylinders got cooler than the other, which is why these exist. These are not for fun. What they do is they then direct air over the engine in a straight fashion to cool it evenly. And when the bonnet is shut and the engine's not moving, they've got what they call this little snorkel here, which is a snorkel there, which directs air into there, through that bit there, and out and over the engine, and then underneath the body. Out over the engine and underneath the body. And the body does not have an underbody cover like a race car. For that reason, you've got to get the hot air out from underneath it. So if you stroll down the side of the car, the air goes into the wheel arches as it sometimes would. There's turbulence along the side, as there sometimes is, and we get to this rather enormous rear wing. Now, if you look at this rear wing and the profile of the GT3 car rear wing, and I give it a slight feel, I don't know how much you can see, that's the profile of that. The profile of this is actually even thicker. This has several different positions it can be in, and this flap here is in its sort of low mode when you're absolutely on it flat out in a straight line, but if you're in race mode and you start braking, up it comes, or if you start cornering, up it comes to give you front and rear balanced downforce. These things here, this is the interesting thing, the motors for this are all in this top panel of wing, and then these struts here are joined into the boot into another set of struts, which means that the weight from the rear wing comes down onto the boot floor and into the chassis, and that means that the bloke who designed this rear wing, this boot lid, did not have to worry about the fact that 500 kilograms of downforce would be going onto his boot lid. It just goes straight down into the chassis instead, and that is the clever active and passive aerodynamics on the GT car, and it is allowed to be this good by the fact that the same aerodynamicist did both. In fact, he says the rear wing on the road car is more efficient. So you'll notice the GT3 car has its hot air coming out here in one big scoop. On the road car, hot air comes out this side and is directed down towards the A-pillars. This side directed to those A-pillars, so the air, the cold air, the good cold air that you really want coming over the bonnet is the stuff that acts on the rear wing. So it's actually more efficient. It has a drag coefficient of 0.42 CD, and whether you have these 3-position rear wings in their street or race mode can make up to 300 kilograms difference of total downforce on this car. It is aerodynamically a real whiz.
Okay, I will talk to the guy behind you.
Okay, cool.
And then we can start.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, so that is DTM and GT legend Bernd Schneider, who he will lead, I will follow. He goes quite fast, so that's good news. Go faster than I can, unsurprisingly. So he says stay in ESP on or ESP Sport. Maro Engel earlier said, well look, if you want to go ESC off a bit, you can. I've already put it in ESC Sport because you can feel it immediately cutting in. Right. So this is quite a bumpy circuit, and on this soft mode you get quite a lot of body lean. In this GT there is a little bounce. The bonnet's very long, it's nearly 2 meters long, but the engine is sat well back in it, so it does feel slightly sort of front mid-engined rather than front engined. And that engine sounds totally different, doesn't it, to how the AMG V8 usually sounds. More like a really highly tuned 4 with loads of pickup on this circuit. I think there was some GT3 racing here not that long ago, so you can feel that hit underneath. The steering is light. The brakes are seriously good. Loads of feedback. Just feel that body movement. I may, when I get a moment, it's quite a busy circuit, try and put the dampers into sports mode. Just feel the ABS kick in ever so slightly. It's got that nice balance that front-engined cars do have. That once you get the front planted, you can start to mess around a little bit with the rear end. Now, it's not messing around that much because the ESC is on Sport Plus, but if you're smooth with it, you can just feel it start to go. Revs to about 7. Right, let's see if I can get those Sports Plus dampers on, that's better. Yeah, the steering is light, but there's grip at the front, and once it's in, you can start to play around with the chassis, and it feels quite faithful. I think it probably pays to trail the brakes into corner to keep some weight on the nose and keep that loaded, and it's mighty fast. The gear shifts do that curious Mercedes thing where you don't always get the shift you want straight away. It's funny how it does that. Whereas in a GT Porsche or something like that, you ask, you get. Sometimes there's a wee delay on this. Right, I think I've just turned ESC on. I'm trying to turn it all off. Let's hold that. Now, right, now I've got TC on instead. So that puts control over to a little dial in the centre of the wheel, which should allow the chassis to move around a little bit more. So it feels probably a heavier car, I would think, than, say, a 911 Porsche, GT3 or GT3 RS or something, but there's a tiny bit of understeer if you don't get the corner exit right. It does push on ever so slightly. Traction control is quite grumpy here. Let's see if I can adjust that. I don't know what I've adjusted it to. A little bit of understeer in the higher speed corners, but there's enough power to just sort of balance it out on the throttle. And it just has that, what I really like is that sort of balance of front to rear that large GT cars, front engine sports cars have. And don't forget, this is, you know, the clue's in the name, it's called the AMG GT. They've taken what is a wide, civilized, hot roddy sort of car and turned it into a track sports car that rewards and appreciates a smooth driving style. And if you give it that, you end up with something which is Perfect lap, says Bernd. I think he's being generous. Yeah, it takes that sort of brutish GT attitude, tries to make it into a sports car. Feels like they've sort of tried to infuse some race car feel to it. What I really like about it is once you get the front in and it's settled, then you can adjust it. I mean, I haven't gone wild, but you can adjust, you can feel the power just straightening the line in very sort of faithful fashion. It's really good. It's really good. AMG doesn't always get it spot on with its Black Series models. SLK was a weird old car, but then the CLK Black was absolutely fabulous. SL was a curious thing, and I never drove an SLS, but this is a really impressive track car in a way that, well, yeah, it is in the sort of GT3 RS Porsche sort of mould. And you can't argue with the effort they've gone to with the engine and the aero. There is loads of engineering into it, and as a result, turns out it's really good. Thanks for joining me. You can like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. We'd appreciate that very much. We'll be back with more sensible car reviews, news, motor shows. Not that there are many of those these days. And other events and features, twin tests. Very soon. We're at autocar.co.uk, all good news agents. Thanks for watching. See you next time.